Welcome to Objections with Stan Willis. I'm Stan Willis, and you are also Stan Willis. Stan, how are you?
I'm great, Stan. How are you?
I thought it was easier because I feel like the attention really has to be on Stan Willis since it's in the name.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's selfish that you don't even put my name first. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I've watched a lot of shows about it.
Exactly. So have I.
As we were discussing the A-Team, I could pull off a heist if we had two more guys.
You could. Wait, would you be face?
Of course, look at me. And you would be B.A. Baracus because you have the most hair.
I want to be Murdoch.
You can't be Murdoch. That's the crazy guy.
Okay.
You can't be a lawyer known as the crazy guy. Actually, you could be MacGyver. MacGyver knew how to fix things. You know how to fix things.
Occasionally, yeah.
Okay.
I can fix things.
Well, I don't have a role unless I'm the broad on the show.
All right.
We're drifting too far away from the important thing today. And the important thing today is everybody has to go out there and get stuck with this magical elixir. Jim Biden made a big announcement that he had a 6-point plan.
It's actually Joe. Jim.
Until he gets things right, I don't have to get his name right. I have this rule with him.
But you're confusing everyone.
Well, I thought it was weird because it was breaking news. They know.
Are you confused? No, you're not confused? Okay, so Nathan's not confused. You're in good shape.
Well, to clarify this, Nate, in post, put in 81 million votes. They'll know what I mean. So, Joe Biden's 6-point plan was really just 3 and then duplicated. What I want to know is, I want to know this.
So if we're going to only have 3 points, does that mean we have to share?
Well, I don't quite understand how you come up. I have 6 points and 4 and 5 are the same.
It's all about math.
It was 1,000 points of light. That was his 1,000 points of light. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
When G-Dub said that?
That wasn't G-Dub. That was G-C.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, the one, he was also in the CIA. You know what they say about the CIA? They're always listening.
No, what do they say?
I forget exactly what they say, but you don't want to talk to the CIA. The part of this that's...
Maybe you are.
What if I was? What if this show was me spying on you, but I'm doing shows with you?
That'd be cool. That'd be a new.
That'd be the ultimate Donnie Brasco.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be like the Truman Show all over again, kind of.
Would you feel weird about that? Like you're already being monitored by the NSA anyway. You're like so chill about everything.
I don't care. Monitor me all you want.
You're the Jim Morrison of lawyers.
I am okay.
The Lizard King.
Lizard King.
So again, back to what we were trying to say.
I think Jim's hair was a little bit better than mine, though.
I'm not going to doubt that. And he wore leather pants everywhere.
Not going to wear leather pants. Nobody wants. I'm going to just spare the world from me and leather.
Could you
pants.
be like, on Saturday Night Live, they did the Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer.
Nate would look hot in leather pants.
Could you imagine? He would look hot for sure. His ass would be roasting. He'd have a stew going.
Wait, did you just say a bad word?
Pants?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. So will sue me for it. The question I have is, if a mandate is no matter what, everyone's getting it, and then 2 hours later say, well, not if you work for the government, and not if you work in these certain fields, and not if you do this, because there's a big part that we've gotten on. We've talked about this group of people, and we'll get there. And I don't mean the Irish. We're going to get there, that they're going to be excluded.
Talking about my peeps.
I didn't mean it disparagingly. They're just drunks. What I want to know is, how can you, a person that said a year before that these shouldn't be mandated, you shouldn't be forced, and now you're forcing it. The ACLU last year said, we're not, it should be a choice and all that, and now they flipped. It's like everybody's flipped over to the, you don't have a choice. How does that work in an employment situation? Because we've kind of touched on it here and there, but we didn't know this was coming.
So I mean, there's a lot of different levels to this question, right? So there's the question of whether you're talking about a private organization versus a public organization, a government organization, or a quasi-government organization. If you're talking about a private organization, the private organization can make whatever rules they want as long as it's not an illegal rule. So I can say that you can't work here if you haven't been vaccinated. I can't say you can't work here if you're of a particular ethnic persuasion, because that's illegal. But the vaccination, requiring a vaccination, is not necessarily is not a violation of any laws, at least none that I know of. So a private company can do that. I think we hit on this before, though, but the problem that you have as a private company is if you require vaccination and there are any complications from that vaccination, you probably buy those as a workers' comp claim. So if I'm your employer and I say you can't work here unless you go get vaccinated, so you go get vaccinated, and we actually have some clients who've had some pretty serious adverse reactions.
Can you say their names?
No.
Okay. Can I guess?
I'm not even going to describe the injuries because that.
Can you describe what they look like, and I'll see if they walk in?
No.
Okay. Well,
but anyway.
Okay.
But we have some clients who's had some pretty serious injuries from the vaccination, and the problem for employers is that's going to hit your workers' comp. That's going to be something that is chargeable and winnable under Ohio's workers' comp statute, and probably under most states, because it would be the same as if you said to your employee, you have to go to this work site today, and going to that work site they get injured, or they're injured at the work site, even though it's not your place of business, but you're requiring that, so they're technically on the job as they're doing that. Commute comes out of that. So if they're going from home to a place of work, it doesn't count. But if they're going from your office to a place and they're in an accident, the employer owns that injury also.
But isn't the deal with the vaccines is that no one is held responsible? Because you're saying it's workers'
Well, that's one of the problems is that at least while they're on emergency approval status, the companies have immunity. So
now, but that could change. Everything could change.
Well, if there's a lot of people who think that if the FDA actually approves one of them, which they haven't fully approved one. But if the FDA actually approves one of them, there's a lot of people who believe that the immunity goes away at that point. But I don't know. I haven't really looked into that much, so I don't know. But
don't worry. I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't look into it either. I'm just asking you because you're an expert.
Well, I'm an expert on it.
I think 35% of an answer is just as good as MSNBC gives.
What do you want to know about? I can tell you about anything.
Anyway,
back to the question at hand, the government side of things. Is this hard to follow, Nate? I'm just wondering because I feel like I'm lost.
I feel like we were killing it the first 30 seconds, which is really all you need. We just need a clip for a promo.
Right.
It doesn't matter what we do after that.
All right. Well, good enough.
Well, I want you to touch on this. So if someone's watching, God bless them if they are, the difference in a public and private, right? So I think everyone's looking at it like, oh, everyone has to get it. If it's a university, is that public or private?
Depends on if it's a public or private university.
Right.
So, for instance, Ohio Dominican is a private institution.
Right.
Ohio State University is a public institution.
Okay, and that leads me to my next point. So, Ohio State, they are mandating people get it, right? So, I think Duke is considered a public university.
I don't know. Not sure.
For the sake of argument, let's say it is. Because no one from Carolina is listening to this. They've
also got another, so there's a lot of little weird tentacles in all this, because they'll say, well, you're a private institution, but you take public money because you accept student loan payments that are guaranteed student loan payments, or you accept Pell Grant money or things like that. And so there are a lot of times where the federal government will attempt or will actually coerce what would normally be thought of as a private institution into doing something that they want or complying because they accept federal money.
Okay, so that's where the whole legal aspect of this, because there are so many threads to this. It's not like you can just say it's black or white, right? But the example of Duke was they didn't let anybody come back unless they got both jabs, and they have an outbreak. So everyone there is vaccinated, and then you got the outbreak. That's why I think there's so much confusion in this, is that it's the numbers of cases are going back up, and yet the vaccinated population has gone up too. And one of the things that I heard, I was listening to a guy that invented the RMNA devices and figured out how to do it. He said you can't you can't vaccinate yourself out of a pandemic.
Well, I've heard people say that before. I
heard Nate say it, but I don't listen to him.
The hard part, and I think we've touched on this before, the really hard part in this particular situation is that the all of the issues at this point have become so politicized that it's really, really hard to get good information. It's to the point where you look at the published information and you're not sure whether the published information is correct, because there's a lot of times that they're going back. I mean, with the CDC and the WHO, where they're going back and changing and revising numbers and saying, oh, that number is not right. This is what that number was. So it kind of looks like their numbers may not be reliable. And then, if you go out on the internet, you can find somebody that's saying pretty much everything in the name of science.
Right. I find that an odd thing that we have a country that basically, if you want to run for office, you were talking about how close to God you were and that kind of thing. And now all of a sudden it's switched over that you got to trust the science. I find the same people that have different, let's say, approaches to science now are saying, well, you have to listen to it. Right. I don't know if that's because campaign donors get involved and they go, hey, you know what we'd really like you to say?
Well, like I said, it's just become such a political football, and frankly, when politicians are involved, there's always some kind of, in my mind, because this is the way I think. But if the politicians are pushing something, there's always another agenda afoot. It's not necessarily what you see on the surface. I mean, that's just kind of my read on things. But the really hard thing with this is there's just so much information and so much emotion and so much confusion. It's really hard to, I think, wade through it all and come to, okay, what's the right decision for me? And then on top of that, you have the government essentially just saying, we're going to do this, darn it. Which what I always say is kind of like when your older sibling comes in and says, "Here, drink this,"
right? And
you're like, "No," and they say, "Come on, drink it," and you're like, "No, drink it, or I'm going to punch you." No, I'm not drinking it. I mean, this is the kind of what it feels like when they're, it's the, oh, come on, get the vaccine, and some percentage of people saying no. And then the next thing is, we'll give you $100. And then the people say no. And they say, well, then you won't be allowed to work. And some percentage of people are still saying no. And I think that's the reason for it, is that it's really hard to get good information. And it feels like, it's being coerced for no apparent reason. I think that's what the objections are. Now, you have the flip side argument. You have people who are going, well, why wouldn't you just do this? I mean, it's not that big a deal. I did it. It's fine, right? I mean, that's.
I think along those lines that people thought if it was one, that's fine. Then it became two. Then it became a booster. And at some point, though, if you have to get this 3 to 4 times a year, you have to be curious. Like, you don't get the flu shot 3 or 4 times a year. So I can understand the hesitancy there. I think when it's being put in this, your dad's mad, he came home from work and you're going to do what I say, right, that people are.
There's a natural resistance to that.
Well, especially as Americans, I don't want to be told what to do. We're supposed to have freedom, right? So you're going to push back against that anyway, especially if you didn't vote for the guy. And again, 81 million votes, but that there's still 74 million people that didn't vote for him. Let's put it that way. So if those people are just like, I'm not going to do what he's going to say. We're already, I think the number is over 75% of Americans that they were targeting. This herd immunity was a number we were going for. We've reached it, but now you have the breakthrough cases. I don't care about the vaccine. I only care about how does that affect employment. If so, they called in Disney, Microsoft, other places to meet with Biden, and they are going to get on board with this mandate. So if you're Disney, you're in Florida and you're in California, I think you have 2 different cultures there anyway. Mm-hmm. If Ron DeSantis says in Florida, we're not going to touch this. You don't have to do that. Right. Disney's a private company, right? Mm-hmm. So they can still make their people do it. it just doesn't make sense because, again, like you said, it's down the middle. It's either left or right. I did this. I did left or right. I know that this is my right hand.
That's your left hand.
Well, I meant intimately. So when I look at that and I say these companies in these states, like one of them's a Columbia Coat Company or whatever, well, they're in Vermont. So we know which way those tree huggers are going anyway. Right. It's okay. And Microsoft is in California. We know which way you're going to go. It's the Disney where you've got two different pots of people. You're still going to need people to run those rides and sell your overpriced merchandise, right? So you're literally going to say, we're only going to pick from these people. That's where I think you get into there's got to be something that protects you as an employee or a prospective employee.
I think I figured out what my problem is.
What is that?
I don't have any overpriced merchandise.
Dude, I have tons of it at my house. Well, so Nate and I were talking, unfortunately.
Where do I go to get overpriced merchandise?
www.shopstore.com.
Can you tell me, Nate? You know me?
Disney.
He's not going to know.
Barnes and Noble, if you want to buy. Don't talk to that guy. But we were talking about
he's smarter than me, and I listen to people who are smarter than me.
Yeah, but he never. If he was that, he's not good on the pipes like we are, right? He does the filming and the editing.
He's smarter than that.
That is true. He tried to show me what he did the other day. I didn't realize he was just logging into a website. I'm like, that looks great. That's amazing. He also told me don't look directly in the camera, so I won't. But we were talking about events that are coming up September, October, November that we'd want to go to, but we don't know the protocol. Right. Is it you have to wear a mask? Is it that you have to have a negative test? And a lot of these venues are kind of changing on the fly.
Right.
So if you're trying to make plans to do something as just a person wants to take your kids or your wife or your mistress to something, you have to know these. Well, it's all in flux. So I think the other part is I don't think people are afraid anymore. I think people are just mad. And they're getting upset about false information getting out, not knowing what they're able to do. When I went to Easton, I will say that the traffic is probably 30% of what it was the week before because they put out a press release saying you need to wear the mask. Here's what I found funny. I didn't count the people, but it was like 50-50 people wearing it and not wearing it. No one was enforcing it.
Right.
But when we went to the movie theater, there was one other person in there. The week before, there was like 50, 60 people.
Right.
You are going to kill people's business
by doing this stuff.
Yeah.
See, that's the so the issue from a government standpoint. So I think Biden's making all these executive orders and threatening all these mandates. I don't think he can. I think that there's the 10th Amendment. Are you familiar with the 10th Amendment?
Yes, the right to bear arms. Of course, I know all the amendments. Okay,
fair enough. The 10th Amendment actually is basically says that that any area that the federal government does not specifically have authority in under the Constitution, the states have authority, and the federal government can't usurp that authority. So, I think that from just from the 10th Amendment, the federal government cannot make a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate that everybody has to follow. I don't think they can do that.
Well, what I heard was it was going to go to the Supreme Court and it would be pretty quick to get there. Now, whatever they say, I think it goes back to the housing moratorium. Right. Once it got there, they're like, you can't control that. So why are you making these promises or why are you even saying
doing all this? The real issue comes down to can states and local governments do it? And there actually is Supreme Court authority that states and local governments can actually require a vaccine. There were states back in the early 1900s, and I want to say it was smallpox, but I'd have to go back and look at the case. But during one of the epidemics in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Some states were requiring vaccines, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can do that in this circumstance.
But that also was like 100 years ago.
Oh, a little over, yeah.
Right? I mean, I wasn't there.
I'm just saying that's the authority. That's the legal authority that exists right now. And city and county governments, really, it comes down to what does the state constitution and what do the state statutes permit? So the state actually would have authority to regulate those kinds of things if it wants to, and it does have the authority to to delegate.
Don't get emotional.
I'm sorry, I get it choked up.
I know when we talk about law, you get this little tear in your eye.
Talking about precedent, just
I get so excited about it too, and I'm just like,
I can tell, man.
I try to hold it together. I feel like it's the end of the Notebook, and I'm just like, oh, please talk about precedent some more. And smallpox. It's really smallpox that gets me.
Well, anyway, there is authority that states can require some of these things. So then what you really come down to is a philosophical argument. Now, me as a long-term standing on the middle kind of a guy,
not taking a side.
I like the Florida approach where Governor DeSantis and the Florida legislature is basically saying, we're not going to mandate this. We're not going to allow any government subdivisions to mandate this. However, if you think you need to wear a mask, please wear a mask. If you think you need to be vaccinated, be vaccinated. If you don't think you need to be vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. Basically just saying, do what you think you need to do. And then they do take measures to protect people who are in compromised positions in nursing homes and things like that. They take extra measures there to help protect the most vulnerable populations. I think that's a very reasonable, measured approach to something like this. I don't like the California approach where they're saying everybody has to do this, darn it.
Right.
And if you don't do this, you're going to be shunned and excommunicated.
But I find that so odd that people in California literally want to be shunned. That's like the culture there.
Right.
But they're so quick to jump on this because, again, they're picking one side, right? So,
just to finish my thought.
I'm sorry.
I also don't like the idea that where they're basically saying, "Hey, this is a free for all. This isn't a problem. There's no disease. There's no issue here." I think that's just as irrational an approach as the other end. I think honestly, a middle of the road. Let's use common sense. Let's address this thing in a very common sense way, based upon what we really do know, is the way to approach it.
But how do we get there?
That's a philosophical argument. That's not a legal argument.
Right. But again, I think a lot of our laws are based on, here's the theory, here's the question. Because I think we look at law, people have two ways to look at it. Either everything gets solved in an hour with 16 minutes of commercials, or it is, let's really take the time to break this down and everything that's involved. The point from an outsider's view is that the law is supposed to be so difficult that I can't turn around to you because I just don't like your face. There's got to be a set of laws that we're looking at, and there's got to be something that says this, we've seen this before. I don't like this. Not that you said it. I keep hearing people, we had smallpox in the 1800s. We also had Indians. Now they have casinos. Things change over time. Mm-hmm. Not the smallpox. The Indians have the casinos. Right. I wanted to clarify. So as you move forward and things change and technology changes, these core laws still work. You might have to bend them a little bit to fit this in. But again, we're ignoring having rational conversations, and we're having irrational shouting matches, even on television.
Right. I think, the one thing that has come out of all this, and I think it goes back to the election of Trump, is our culture has gone from a place where you could sit down and have a rational conversation with most people about most things, even if you disagreed, to a point where the manner of debate is to scream as loud as you can and then drop the mic and walk away, as if it's an irrefutable point. And it's interesting that we've become a place where we we claim to prize diversity, but we only prize diversity as long as everybody thinks the same way.
Right.
And if there's any diversity in thinking, then what we want to do is just demand that everybody follow along with it. And that's every side. That's not just one side. I mean, you have certain sides that are kind of screaming louder than others at this point in time. But,
or they have a bigger pulpit, right? Because you can get censored. I mean,
right. But 20 years ago, it was the opposite. I mean, the things, who's in power, prevailing attitudes, cultural kind of things, they're not necessarily cyclical, but they're always changing.
Right.
And that always happens. But what is, I think, what's problematic for me is, you have irrational kinds of knee-jerk reactions being taken in the extremes about everything. There's nobody who's coming in and saying, "Hey, let's look at this and be reasonable." They're just making demands, and I mean, some of the things, some of the rhetoric between our politicians has gotten. I mean, it's almost warlike in its tenor.
Right. It's a war on thought.
Right.
Well, before we leave, I just want to bring this part up because what you just said. Nicki Minaj loved that music. She tweeted something about the Met Gala, which is
that's her real name.
I'm sure that Minaj is definitely her last name. I think it's Nicole.
Yeah.
Nicole Minaj et Twitch, whatever. It's French. She's from New Guinea or something.
I think it means party. I think it's the French word for party.
She doesn't look like somebody that parties. She looks like somebody that reads. But she put out a tweet about that her cousin.
She reads about parties.
I do. I Google it. I don't get on Twitter. Twitter's an ugly place. But on Twitter, she said the reason she wasn't at the Met Gala was because her cousin's sister's boyfriend's friend got the vaccine and got extremely sick in his nether regions. I cleaned it up for you. And then she got censored by Twitter, so she can't tweet. She got her Facebook thing taken down. And then Joy Reid, I think that's her name. I don't know.
On The View?
No, not that lady. There's another. It's a terrible show. No one watches. Less than 140,000 people watch it in the middle of the day. But she literally says, how could you do that to our culture? And girl, you should be ashamed. Now, that's not me making that up. She literally attacked her. So while she's being silenced, the media is attacking her. They used her to promote who the Democratic Party wanted in office.
Right.
So when you're not useful, and I don't mean Republican, Democrat, whoever it is, when you have no more use for me, now I'm coming for you, right? That's the old statement. So I wanted to end on something positive, especially Twitter. Get off Twitter. That's a terrible place.
Twitter is a horrible.
I'm going to send a link for the show, though, and put it only on Twitter. See if someone finds it. Stan, wonderful job today. We almost got our point across. That's been Objections with Stan Willis for this week, and we'll see you next week.